Hello and welcome to Late Agenda. I'm Helen Dalley. There were no surprises at the annual Australia-US Ministerial consultations, also known as the AUSMIN talks today. They confirmed the enduring value of the Australia-US alliance and allowed the new Foreign Minister, Kevin Rudd, and the new Defence Minister, Stephen Smith, to greet their old friends, US Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Defence Secretary Robert Gates. Mr Gates would not confirm there would be more US bases, or places, as they call them now, in Australia.
Speculation is way premature because I have not even made decisions within the Department of Defense on what I'm going to recommend to our own National Security Council and the President that we do in Asia, except to say that the one thing I believe we all agree on is we are looking at an enhanced presence for the United States in Asia and not some kind of cutback.
And Secretary Clinton praised Kevin Rudd for being a guiding force in the Asian region and offering excellent advice over the past 20 months. She said the US is committed to its Afghanistan strategy and believes the Afghans could take over security as soon as next year.
We're convinced that starting next year, there will be parts of Afghanistan that will be under the control of the Afghan government and its security forces. We can't stand here today and tell you when or on what timetable or any of the details, because we will be making those assessments based on the conditions as they occur.
And while the Americans won't say so out loud, much of their repositioning in the region is done with an eye on the rise of China. Hillary Clinton has made it clear throughout this visit that the United States is watching China's growing economic and military power with interest.
As China becomes more of a player in regional and global affairs, then we expect that China will be a responsible player and will participate in the international framework of rules that govern the way nations behave and conduct themselves. So we're not doing anything differently.
Last Wednesday, the Obama administration was battered in the midterm elections, with the Republicans picking up the largest House of Representatives majority since the late 1940s. In a moment, we'll be talking to the CEO of the US Studies Centre in Sydney, Geoffrey Garrett, about the Democrats' debacle. But first, here's a wrap-up of where the Republicans stand now from ABC America's John Donovan.
Listen and see if you can pick out, and it's going to be easy actually, the hottest, hippest word of the week.
Well, it was a historic election.
A historic
election.
Night.
An historic election.
You got it. What we saw in this election, a president who took a shellacking.
I'm sure there are easier ways to learn these lessons.
A GOP that gets to gloat again, just careful not too much.
This is not a time for celebration. It's a time to roll up our sleeves and go to work.
That outcome made this election, oh, here we go again.
Historic opportunity here.
Yes, historic.
60 seats, an historic record.
Or maybe not. Simply put, history is the writing down of what happens, and a lot of things happened even last week. Giants over Rangers to take the series in 5. It happened, but was it historic? Maybe if you live in the Bay Area. For the rest of us, though, historic is defined by what gets remembered long afterward for changing what followed. Like Susana Martinez, the Republican who won the governor's race in New Mexico Tuesday.
She's a Latina, and so this is historic in New Mexico.
Yeah, Wolf, that was arguably historic. No one can achieve that first ever again. But the mere fact of the GOP capture of the House, here is the chart, the 60-plus seats they took from the Democrats. It's a lot, but it's not a record breaker. The thing is, we really need to know what the Republicans ultimately do with their win to see what will really change. 1994, when they swept both houses, then something changed. They came in with clear ideas. They were listed in their contract with America. They said they were going to work with the Democratic president.
We can only have one president at a time. It's President Clinton. And we know that we need to work with him where we can.
And what they got was, after a fair amount of struggle, a Democratic president to declare
the era of big government is over.
Welfare reform. We have never been the same, and both sides had a hand in it. This time, the main GOP idea is not Obama, not his policies.
Our primary legislative goals are to repeal and replace the health spending bill.
And not really much pretense at a governing partnership.
The only way to do all of those things is to put someone in the White House who won't veto any of these things.
So is that the mindset that is going to make things happen in Washington, that will prove that this election in the end was as historic as everyone said it was on night one?
Well, will the Republicans make the midterm elections historic? Here to discuss this and the Hillary Clinton visit is the CEO of the US Studies Centre at Sydney University, Professor Geoffrey Garrett. Professor Garrett, thanks for being with us.
My pleasure, Helen.
Now, let's look at the midterm elections and the wash-up, I guess. I mean, in your view, were they a debacle for President Obama and a repudiation of his presidency?
It was a midterm referendum on Obama, and the midterm referendum was definitely negative. That's clear. Actually, things were more or less as expected. The Democrats did a little less badly in the Senate than was expected. They did a little worse in state governor races. They did about what was expected in the House. It was really bad, but I don't think it's time to write President Obama off yet.
OK, now I read something that Conservative columnist George Will was saying today, is that, you know, everybody's trying to say, oh, well, it wasn't as bad as expected. But in a sense, how is President Obama going to get any of his agenda through now?
Well, President Obama's agenda as such, or a left-leaning Obama agenda, is probably dead in the water in the short term. So I would think no cap-and-trade legislation for climate change, no movement on immigration reform, two important things for the left in the US. What Obama will now do, I think, is tack to the centre the way Bill Clinton did, and I would see three things there. The first is that probably Obama and the Democrats will have to hold their nose and extend the Bush tax cuts, including for wealthy Americans. They'll then, in 2011, have to take very seriously...
But sorry, what does this do to the spending and, you know, the debt that's already spiralling pretty much out of control in the United States?
That is the second issue. So, yes, the US is running trillion-plus deficits, will for the first 3 years of the Obama administration, but I think there is some consensus that that's still needed. The US economy has recovered a little bit, but it's not a classic V-shaped recovery. Things are trending along quite flat, at least where jobs are concerned in the US. So we had the Federal Reserve last week buy more government debt, so that's another fiscal stimulus in essence. I don't think anyone wants to do away with that. The debate actually on taxes has been, do you only, as President Obama promised, keep taxes low on Americans below $250,000 a year, or do you keep the Bush tax cuts for people above $250,000? I think now the Democrats will have to accept that if they want to keep the low-income tax cuts, they'll have to keep the high-income ones too.
So doesn't that make him, in effect, a lame duck president? He's doing the Republican agenda, not his own.
Well, his agenda will have in it, these are the second two things I wanted to mention. The tax cuts part is going to be tough. There'll be temporary extensions, 3, 4, 5 years, because in the longer run, fiscal responsibility has to be the name of the game. And your package referred back to Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton certainly, as Americans said, ended welfare as we know it in the era of big government. But what that really meant was that the Democrats became the party of balanced budgets. And I think Barack Obama is going to try to do that as well by identifying spending cuts. The spending cuts part is going to be really tough. But the other thing, just briefly, he'll do is probably push free trade. We've heard a lot about the Asia Pacific in Australia today. It's been mostly security, but I would expect in the next couple of years the economic agenda in the Asia Pacific to be at least as important.